Lenergy Media readers, welcome to our first federal election coverage. And we're going to start off today with Sandy Garossino, who's a writer for the National Observer. So welcome, Sandy.
Hi, Markham.
Now, you're based in Vancouver. So give us kind of the lay of the land in the Lower Mainland for how the campaign is going.
Gosh, it's so hard to tell because the deep writing by writing polls, we're not really seeing a lot, or not a lot that is necessarily all that reliable. And of course, Twitter is not the best
Sure.
way to judge any of this. But I would say that, this is environmental territory, the same way that Quebec is an environmental territory. And certainly in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia, there's a pipeline that is scheduled to run right through here. Almost everybody in the Lower Mainland will be within not too distant proximity from that pipeline, and it is a hot issue, even among those who are probably inclined to support it. It has just achieved a symbolic importance that eclipses almost everything else on the climate file.
Well, let's talk about Trans Mountain expansion for a moment, because of course the federal government had to buy Kinder Morgan Canada, that included the TMX project, and they vowed to get it through. It's being challenged. Many of our readers will know the ins and outs of the Federal Court of Appeal story. We don't want to go over that. But I guess the point here is, as you say, it's contentious. But you know what? In the national media, from a national point of view, TMX has not played, I think, the role that we expected it to play. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that the whole issue around, the fact is that in central Canada, they don't much care about what goes on west of the Ontario-Manitoba border.
Spoken like a true Westerner. Absolutely.
But I think that's true, and you see that in coverage of major issues over and over and over again. So it's not surprising me that it hasn't featured that much. But look at how the coverage has played out in this election. This has been a personality. This has been a popularity contest election. This has not been what issue has been a major issue? This is a referendum on Justin Trudeau, as far as I can tell.
Well, I think I would agree with you. And even though the polls keep saying that climate change is the number one issue, that really hasn't been a lot of discussion about the various climate plans. And that's really too bad, because what we're finally seeing from the Libs, the New Democrats, and the Greens are really substantive climate plans. Not so much for the CPC. I think they've basically been given a failing grade by the economists and experts that I've interviewed. So what's the take down in the Lower Mainland on those climate plans?
Well, that is where we get to what you've referenced, Markham, which is the pipeline. The noise about the pipeline amongst anybody for whom the climate is a key issue is so overwhelming that it really kind of drowns out everything else, as far as if you were to listen to the general gist of conversation amongst what we would call the environmental community, or people who are motivated by that issue. You would think that the Liberal and the Conservative climate plans are identical and will have identical impact, whereas the NDP and most likely the Greens are the Valhalla, and the dividing line is pipeline. And so it's how this will play out as the results start to come in, and we get a sense of what our destiny is going to be. That's going to have a big impact. I would say this. I think that if the Conservatives were to get themselves into a position of a government position, if they would take the government and cancel the carbon tax, I think the opposition to the pipeline right here in the Lower Mainland will go through the roof. I think that for the people, most of whom, the people who have accepted it, I would count myself as one of those, but the great number of British Columbians who do support the pipeline, they do as part of a package deal. And
Well,
this
let's
was a
talk
part.
about that for a moment, because the I think the conventional wisdom is that if we see a liberal minority government, it'll be propped up by the Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, who are implacably opposed to the TMX project. So if we look forward to that, to the end of the evening, and that's the scenario we wind up with, are lower mainlanders kind of, licking their chops and saying, aha, we finally got enough leverage on Trudeau that we can get him to back out of that project?
To cancel the deal. That's absolutely intriguing to me, and I've been thinking about this, and I'd like to say that I've researched it. I haven't, but my question is, can it be stopped now?
Right.
Because I don't think it has to go to, there's no legislation that is, no more enabling legislation. It's gone through all its environmental review and everything. Really, it's the issue around consultation, the issues. We weren't going to bring up the Federal Court of Appeal, but here it is. Does the project pass muster according to the requirements laid out by the Federal Court of Appeal? And there are some environmental considerations there, and consultation of First Nations. If the project gets court approval, I don't know that there's anything. I mean, I suppose the NDP could say, look, we're not going to support this project, or we're not going to support your government unless you find a way to cancel this project.
Sure.
You're the owners. The TMX is no longer Kinder Morgan, who is shall we say, an innocent third party acting in good faith. I think that would be a really terrible message to send to the international business community, by the way, which is that somebody could go through years and years and years of process as a good faith participant, get the approval, and then have the government come in and say, sorry, we're not going to play ball. But now that the pipeline is owned by the federal government, I think that might be a live issue. You're going to have more to say on this, Markham, but I think the government is still in a really serious quandary and position, because it's not just Kinder Morgan that is held up by this pipeline, but there's a lot of jobs on the line in Alberta and a lot of GDP. I'm just working this through mentally as we're discussing it, and I think this is going to be a really, really difficult issue for the government if it's in a minority position.
I would agree entirely, and we could probably spend a couple of hours chatting about this, because it's a very complex problem. There are legal and constitutional issues, many political issues. So let's go on to something that I paid a little bit of attention to, but not much, and that's the saga of Judy Wilson-Raybould, the former Liberal Justice Minister and Attorney General, who's now running as an independent and is being opposed by a young a Liberal named Talib, whose last name I've forgotten. And
Nur Mohammed.
Thank you. We're friendly on Facebook, so I should remember that. But anyway, so Talib has been running a pretty good campaign. I think the local numbers that I've seen show it as kind of a neck and neck race. What's your take on that?
Well, there was quite an interesting tell last night when Elizabeth May tore a strip off Andrew Scheer for campaigning in that riding. The Green Party is running a candidate in that riding, and notwithstanding that, Elizabeth May has been campaigning in the riding for Jody Wilson-Raybould. And when she objected to Andrew Scheer campaigning in that riding for Wilson-Raybould, or for the Conservative candidate, I beg your pardon, I think that what she was really indicating was, hey, everybody, we had a deal. And the deal was that we were all going to support Jody Wilson-Raybould against the Liberal candidate. So Conservative, NDP, Green, and Jody Wilson-Raybould's own natural constituency, the theory is that they would combine. This is my riding, by the way. I feel like she's going to take it. That's just my feeling, that there is a strong enough sense, the signals have been coming from all the other parties to line up and support Wilson Raybould and keep that seat from going Liberal again.
Well, that's a very interesting jockeying by the federal leaders in that particular riding. And I know it's a sticking point for the Liberals and has been for the, of course, for the Prime Minister. So we'll watch that riding, which I believe is Granville, correct?
Yeah, Vancouver Granville.
Vancouver Granville. So we'll watch that riding throughout the evening. What other issues? Are there another one or two issues in the Lower Mainland that have been, you know, of interest to voters this time around?
Gosh, I would really like to say that there are, but I really feel that it's been so much a personality issue. I will say that this hasn't got a lot of media and a lot of press, but the situation with China and with Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei chief financial officer, who is under house arrest or as a bail condition, is here in Vancouver. And how that is playing out. You know, we have an enormous Canadian Chinese population, both mainland Chinese and Hong Kong Chinese. And the drama that is playing out in Hong Kong is playing out on the streets here in Vancouver. And I would say that there's a certain degree of dissatisfaction amongst the public that Canada does not seem to be able to leverage more. We're stuck, and we've got these two people detained in China, and you know, as a foreign relations issue, that we're just kind of mired.
Right now, is that playing out? Is that playing out to the disadvantage of the Liberals? Because of course they were in government when that happened. So is that the angle here?
Well, it depends on the riding, because it depends on the makeup of the riding. There are ridings that have very high mainland Chinese populations, and those ridings are, and a lot of those people, a lot of those constituents are very, you know, they're backing China, and they see this issue as a politicization issue and a trade tariff issue with Donald Trump. Other people, other constituents in other ridings that don't have that kind of makeup, absolutely want to see Canada look like it's got more muscle in this game.
Well, Sandy, thank you very much for this. We really always appreciate talking to you. It's always insightful, and I guess we'll both be glued to the numbers this evening as the returns come in. So thank you very much for coming out today.
Thanks, Markham.